Okay. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes to let all the attendees come in from the waiting room, and then we'll get going. Okay. All right. Well, it looks like everybody's come in now. I'm sure we're going to get a few additional people come in as it starts to get underway. But in the interests of understanding that everyone has very busy lives, I think we're going to get going. So first of all, I just want to say welcome to everybody. My name is Emma Gibbons, and I'm the CEO of Volleyball BC. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our webinar tonight. Just for those of you who may have not come to any of our previous webinars, this is now, I think, the second or third year that we have done a webinar series throughout the club season, because we have heard overwhelmingly from our members in our member survey that they really value the support and the information and the resources that we can provide around mental health and well-being, and how important that is to the performance of our players, coaches, and referees in the club system. And so over the last couple of years, we've made it a priority to really try and recognize and support that side of individual development, as well as obviously the physical skills that people acquire when they start playing volleyball. So it is my pleasure tonight to welcome the first in our webinar series, which is on the topic of positive team dynamics. This, again, is something that we consistently hear from people in terms of areas or topics that they would like us to talk about. And so I'm very excited to kick off this year's 2025 series of webinars on this exact topic. I'd like to first acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish First Nation. So although volleyball is played across the province, and we have people here presenting and attending from across BC, the Lower Mainland is where Volleyball BC's headquarters is based, and that's where I'm speaking to you today. And so without much further ado, I am going to pass over to our two co-presenters who are going to be talking to you this evening, and that is Dr. Shaunna Taylor and also Kyla Ritchie. So Shaunna, please take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. I'm really excited to start things off for 2025. I know for some of you, you might have tuned in last year or the year prior. I don't know how many years now. Has it been since 2023? I think maybe. Yeah. But yeah, really a huge area of interest and passion for me. The former chair of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association. We're an association committed to exactly these type of topics and fields and interventions and collaboration with sport across Canada. And I'm also a teacher or a professor at UBC, where I work almost exclusively with coaches, actually, in the field of sports psychology as well. So really thrilled to be working again with volleyball. It's one of my favorite sports, honestly, to work with. And in my mind, of all the sports I've worked with, it is probably one of the ultimate team sports, which is amazing. So we're going to talk about exactly that tonight, the fact that it is a team sport, and it's so critical that we address that idea of team. I think we're talking about the group dynamics. I also have an amazing human being who is a phenomenal mental health ambassador, Kyla, who's going to be joining me. And Kyla's the one, she's got the rich experience here. So we'll be turning it over to her lots to give her lived experience, which is amazing. And that's what I think makes these sessions so unique, is that it's partly research-based, partly practice-based, partly lived experience-based. So thanks for joining us, Kyla. I know you got a lot going on and you're making some time for this. So thank you. And you'll be chiming in soon. So what we're going to go over today, because this particular session is geared towards athletes, but also their families, I expect some parents will be watching this as well, or maybe other support members. I call them key influencers, whoever those guardians and custodians in the family are. Looking at being values driven as a program. What does sport culture even mean? right? What does your team sport culture, how do you know what kind of culture you have? How do you influence it if it's something that you might want to change or maybe cultivate? And what are some of those social skills? We want them to be social skills, obviously, versus anti-social skills that we can try to encourage and grow as our athletes grow as well. So this will be where we'll be focusing. And these areas, ultimately, I hope are going to be creating more fun, more harmony, but that leading to performance, right? So it's not that all these things are mutually exclusive, like you can't have fun and you can't have harmony and you can't have performance in one. I truly believe that you can cultivate climates where all three are present. And that's where we're going to look today. So the first topic then of those three that I just outlined will be taking a closer look at values. And people throw this term around a ton, right? We're values driven. We're going to be a values driven organization. We know we've seen that a lot with big corporations. They have huge value statements and vision statements on their website, but are they really? What's their customer service really like? What's the quality of their service they deliver or the product that you're buying? And so for us, we are our own product. We are the end users. This is the beauty of sport in our community and in your amazing sport of volleyball. What is the spirit? What are the guiding principles? Sometimes we don't think about what they are or how are they going to show up in my club every day. And so as an athlete or as a parent, what are my values? Are they congruent? Are they aligned with what we stated are my team values, right? Is the team demonstrating these values? So sometimes, and I don't know what will be the experience for the athletes and parents who are listening in tonight or who might watch this when it's recorded, you may have had in the past a team session where you do maybe a preseason values session. I know it's quite common. Many coaches like to do this early on in the season where they'll get together as a team and they'll bring out a bunch of values. You can print them out as cards. You can have them displayed on a projector or something like that, or you can hand out cue cards so that you can hone things down to what your team is going to stand for. What kind of climate do we want to create? But ultimately, what are the values that underpin that climate? And so if you haven't had that kind of exercise, you can still do it on your own as an athlete and think about, well, what are my personal values? What are the things that I stand for as a person? Or you could even, if you're a leader type, you could present to your coach that you'd be interested in maybe getting together with your teammates and running some kind of an exercise like this, a values building session rather. So it can be great at the start of a season. Maybe it's a reminder or a check-in that you do mid-season, or it could be a great team builder as you're heading into tournaments or things like provincials, just to sort of check, are we actually walking the talk? What is really important to us in the way of how we conduct ourselves and our core values? There are tons. If you just use a little something called Google and you just Google, team value list, and keywords like that, you're going to find tons of printables. You can find even PowerPoint decks that you can roll through. You can download them. You can print them out. If you're doing this individually, you might want to just make a meaningful list of your own. And I've just put a few on this screen here. This is not a full list, obviously. There are tons of human values that are important to groups and group dynamics. And these are just some that are common. They're by no means in no particular order. And I know that I'm missing some. And later we're going to hear from Kyla, maybe some of the values that stuck with her over the years for teams that were really high functioning that she was on. If she looks back now, what were the values of that team? So get ready, Kyla, prepare yourself, because that will be my question. Hot tip, that's what you're going to be talking about in a few minutes. Spoiler alert. So this is an example, and this is actually a real life example of a team that I did some work with. They decided they were going to value creativity this year. This year, we were going to do things differently because we're a squad. It's our third year together. We know each other really well. We've gone from 14, 15, 16 years old now. We're going to value creativity. So what's that going to look like? Okay, well, I'm going to try new things on the court, right? I'm going to go outside my comfort zone. I'm going to try new things that maybe I've seen on video or I've really admired other teams doing, or maybe I've watched some international match or talked it over with my coach. We've never done this before. Do you think we could try? Sure. Right. And secondly, I'm also going to do something that's not necessarily just volleyball related. I am a creative person and I'm going to bring, arts and crafts stuff on the road. And this particular athlete, now not everybody's going to be a professional caricature artist, but they were so amazing at they drew like anime, really amazing kind of graphic novels and caricatures. And they made one for all their teammates. And it was the coolest thing. And everyone was like, okay, I'm framing this, but it really was a way for that particular athlete to show, there's a way that I can do things creatively when it comes to my sport, but also I'm going to bring that creative mind, the other side of me, and bring that on the road with me, bring that to the team and use it. So that could look different for anyone. Maybe you don't pick creativity as one of the first values that you think of that you're going to run through your filter. But I wanted to give you a lived idea of a young team that I've been working with recently. Here's another one, because we know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is really important globally, but also this sort of the inclusion piece, I guess, the aspect of belonging is really important. Forging close relationships and feeling like you belong is often a really important value with teams. And so this was one of the teammates of the same team, wasn't a volleyball team, but was also a team sport. I'm just going to tell you what it was. It was softball. Anyway, very, very big team sport as well. I'm going to pay attention to the locker room and some of the team activities in the field house when we're out there beforehand. And if anybody's looking like they're kind of left out, or they don't look like they're feeling included, or we're starting to get, those 3 or 4 people over there keep excluding everybody, or they always pair up, they never pair up with anyone else, I'm going to encourage the coach, or I'm going to go in there and say, hey, can I join you? Right? If everyone plays a part in, cliques are a natural part of group dynamics. They're common. You gravitate towards people with whom you share a lot of things in common. But the word clique itself, when it's used in a more negative sense, can be very exclusionary to other people, right? So in this sense, we're looking at a clique as being counter to cohesion, and it excludes other people. So how do we keep that in check? Well, maybe some of these types of approaches could work. So for athletes that are listening right now, or maybe parents, sitting down with your child and thinking about your family, what are our values as a family, as a volleyball family? What would we name as our sort of top 5? And every time we go to a tournament or a gym, or I volunteer at an event, how am I making sure that I'm aligning myself with those same values? This was a really interesting take that a different sport, so I have on top lacrosse, they decided that one of their values was, as an association, they were going to make a renewed commitment to make sure that they respected their officials. And they actually combined creativity and belonging and respect on this promotional poster that they came up with. So it looks like it's the Port Coquitlam Saints. And just drawing the attention to, like, hey, guess who's sitting in the stands when you're shouting some of that stuff? Are you doing certain behaviors that aren't particularly respectful? Let's remember those officials. Look at them. They're sitting right there. They're holding their kids. They're sitting with their spouses. They've got their friends are right there. It humanizes the environment so that it brought home a really important point: is we want to show that we value the people that help keep everybody safe and keep the field of play fair. And that's our officials. So this was one way that they decided to put those values into action. So it could be an organization does it. It could be player-led and driven. It could be a family thinking about their values. It's up to you how you want to be able to convey that. Values are the foundation, I guess you could say. They're the concrete of the house that you're building. They're the solid ground. They're the walls. but they are a little more maybe esoteric though, like they're a little more up in the clouds. How do they actually show up from the day to day? That's where we had the athletes really think about, okay, well, how do I show that I'm creative? How do I show that I actually care about belonging? What can I do actively to make sure that belonging exists? What can we do as an organization to show that we respect officials? It's enough on the poster that those are words, right? What do the actions look like? So the more flexible and harder to define concept is team culture. Values is one thing. We can write them down as individual words, but what is their relationship with what your team culture is? That's a little bit kind of tougher. So maybe before we move any further, I'm wondering if we can then go to Kyla, because I gave her the spoiler alert. Were there certain times where you were with teams and those values, I guess, the alignment, the check-ins for the alignment or the lived experience felt really like they really aligned well? And how did you cultivate that as a team or as a player? What do you think? What are some of your standout memories of the values that you stood for as a player?
Great question. Um, I think through a lot of the high level teams that I was a part of, um, there's of course like so many different pillars of values that I can touch up on. I'll think of a few of my favorites, but one of them I think is that continuous growth and learning that you have as an athlete. Um, at the highest level with my national team or my best professional team, we're not just rolling into the gym and maybe playing a scrimmage and then going home. Like the drills are to improve, like we're refining our skills. And that was at like the top of my game, the top team that I've ever been on. Like we're, of course, refining our skills. We're practicing. Volleyball is a game of mistakes. And I think embodying that as a player just sets you apart individually as a player. And also if you get the collective thinking about that, then everybody's trying to get better. Everybody's, coming in with a good attitude. I think that's one thing that really sets great teams apart from the good teams. If you have a team of stars, for example, and they're not really willing to put in the work, then they're not really going to have a lot of success and they're not going to take it to that next level. So I think having that is really, really important. Another one is the we over me mentality. That was really present when I was at UBC for all 5 years. And when I played my time at UBC, we won 5 national championships. So I think we did something right during each of those years. And the interesting part is that every year was super different. One year we went completely undefeated in the league. One year we barely made playoffs, lost a lot of games, like we're just scraping by. But I think one of the things that I attribute our coach doing, and again, the culture that we are building, is that everyone was embracing their role on the team, whether you were a starter, whether you had really minimal time. As players, we understood that everybody plays such an important role. If I'm on the court, if I'm on the starter, on the starting six, and our bench is, they're chatting, they're laughing, they're not really engaged in the game, they're looking in the stands, they're playing with each other's hair, I know that they're not engaged in the game, and that doesn't make me feel good. Likewise, if I'm on the bench and the starting six is kind of just coming on and off, that also doesn't make me feel valued. If the team can be meshed as much as possible, often the best thing to do is like a left side and a left side. You kind of come together, like you match up as a player.
Yeah.
If you're on the bench, you can come up and tell a starter or someone that's playing, like, what are you seeing on the outside? Like, this um, the setter, was really back. You can do a tip in the middle, she's not going to get it, and vice versa. Just always having that communication, I think, is really key. That also is another value that really sets teams apart, is just having that full we mentality, and just knowing that everything is for the good of the team. I can go into more, but we have lots of to cover, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, I could just keep listening, but yeah, it's true. Thanks. Thanks for stopping, because I was like just loving where you were going with it.
Keep going.
I think, like, how do I guess let's just call it then, the value is the we over me, right? It's the I don't know what the word is of that, but that's the concept, is the collective, right? The holistic sort of collective. You have
Yeah.
to be thinking about what's right for the team.
Selflessness, kind of.
Selflessness in there. Yeah, you've got to have that gear. You've got to have that gear in a team sport, especially, right? I love that. Those were both really great, tangible examples, and sort of lived examples of those. So the values, they're linked right in. And I guess here, if we look at how we're going to define, because a lot of people had sent in notes that they wanted to talk about, team culture and how to create a positive team culture. That was a lot of the feedback that Emma got on the surveys that they sent out over the past years. So, what even is team culture? It's a really interesting and sometimes challenging to define phrase, I guess, or concept. So this is one definition that I found. So the expression of a team's, so you'll see values are in there, right? Values, attitudes, and goals about, so both the sport, how you view competition, and how you build relationships. So that's interesting. It's important because it directly influences many areas that affect individual and team functioning and performance. So that's one definition. This next definition is interesting because it gives a bit of a prescription as well. The culture establishes norms of acceptable behavior, either explicitly, so it says it right out loud and it's got it maybe written down in a code of conduct, for example, or implicitly, which means isn't really written anywhere, but our actions convey that this is acceptable. Okay, we've let things slide, or we've agreed somehow implicitly that this is part of our culture. We're allowing this, even though we haven't written it anywhere, right? So culture is both explicit and outward, or implicit and kind of covert and underground. The norms can dictate then how you behave, right? How you cooperate, how you communicate with each other, and how you manage things like conflict. And you'll see I highlighted this piece. When clear norms are established, everyone is more likely to abide by them. So if we lead too much up to chance and we just leave, well, we'll just develop our culture and we'll just never talk about it. It'll just be what it will be. I really think the more that we can really clearly establish them, which doesn't mean just writing them down, we have to have coaches and parents and athletes themselves see themselves in the culture, right? And how those values and how those expectations show up as behaviors. So you have to think about it as an athlete. Okay, what right now, if I had to define, some of the key things that describe my team values or past teams that I may have been on, or maybe even in other sports, here's some more positive traits and here's some negative traits that might show up in a team culture. In a more positive team culture, you've got really high levels of trust. And usually there's lots of open dialogue. People feel free to speak, right? They feel free to raise their hand and contribute. There aren't bad ideas, right? They feel open and that they're able to trust one another with information and relationships. You'll see with a more negative team culture, people are usually more afraid to speak up because they've seen from either past experience, or it's been just it's been stated right out loud that they shouldn't be contributing too much with the ideas or pushing back. Low levels of trust will start to form. On the positive traits, including fun in practices, so really joy. Fun is a great thing. Fun doesn't have to be missing from high performance or competitive team environments. In fact, I think joy has to be present there alongside a hard work ethic, right? And if you don't, if you're watching some teams, not just volleyball, but a lot of different team settings, the ones that where there's never any laughter or very little laughter, right? Not a ton of, like, you're seeing this person is passionate and joyful, glimpses of it between the hard work, right? I'm not saying everything's a joke fest, but you can tell after a really tough drill or inter-squad match, there's some laughs, there's some smiles, there's some, wow, that was tough, but we made it, and you can see when the joy and the fun is present at all levels, no matter how hard it is and how competitive it is. On the positive traits, an emphasis on, again, relationships. It's like what Kyla said, it was all about the relationships that were formed in the dynasty program that she was a part of, right? It's how players viewed each other, how they viewed staff and vice versa, the relationships that got formed. There was time for social connection and there was a priority on connecting, right? And the role you play. If you haven't put that effort in, or you don't take that extra time, give the players a little extra time or opportunities to really grow those positive relationships. It's all down to business. Let's get in, let's get out. It's pretty tough to build that culture of belonging and those positive relationships. We're all tasked for time, but there's lots of ways to stack something that will interconnect and bond your team and also teach great skill building. You can do a lot of things at the same time. Maybe that's a whole other webinar, but just thinking about ways you can do that. And then lastly, just the work ethic and personal growth, the belief and demonstrating that working really hard and growing and improving and being and valuing those will lead to performance. And you feel sure of that because you see in the behaviors of the team. If you find you're in a culture, though, that you're terrified to make mistakes, because the main focus is on outcomes, it's not really on how hard you worked or how hard your teammate worked. And you congratulated them on, look, I know you were working so hard out there today. I could tell you were really bringing it and it just wasn't coming together, and that's okay. We'll get it next time. Instead, if you don't start cultivating that work ethic and the congratulating and noticing the hard work and growth, only focused on outcomes, will eventually start to build this really fixed mindset and a fear of making any errors, which is, of course, impossible. In your sport, like Kyla said, it's a game of mistakes, right? Like all sports are. So the conduct and the culture that gets cultivated, if you want to really make it count, I don't think it's enough to just have a culture statement or have a memo or have an email go out to your teams. I think it's a great start. I think it's great to write things down and take a look at your culture and be really intentional about the kind of culture that you want to create, and be bold and say it, reach for the stars, challenge people to go for it with you, but they're still just words, right? How do they actually show up? Sort of like that values exercise. You athletes, you have to insert yourself into the values in your culture. How do I become part of the we versus just the me, like Kyla was talking about, right? So you can get really creative on how you might want to enforce or maybe encourage positive cultural norms, like we just saw in the previous slide. A couple things that you can do is you can really chat as athletes and even as families. You can talk with your youth of what are your expectations for yourself? What are your expectations for your teammates? What are your expectations for your coaches or for the club, right? And what are you going to bring in turn to match their expectations? Do you even know what your teammates' expectations are of you? Have you talked about it? So sometimes you can have, I'll do this sometimes with teams that I'm working with, or coaches will conduct this after a practice or even during a practice, on offense. What are our expectations here? Okay. So you can include this in a technical practice, or you could have it more to do with social expectations, right? Or what are our expectations around how we speak to one another? How we drive each other when we're getting down. how we accept feedback, how we interact with our families before and after games, or maybe even during competition, right? So these are just some of the questions here. You know, how do you communicate? What does that look like? How are we going to solve conflict when it pops up, right? Someone's feeling not included. Someone feels like people have been talking about them when they're not there, and then they show up and there's tension, and it's embarrassing, and it makes them feel sad and isolated. You know, is that the kind of communication that we want to have on our team? How are we going to solve it if somebody's feeling that way, right? Get you and yourself, your peers as athletes, the strongest communication or the strongest answer, I guess, and method for solving some of these is when you are an active agent in solving it yourselves. So it can really help to have a coach facilitate it, or it might be a manager, or it might be a more senior player. Maybe you've got a core of players who have a lot of leadership qualities that might feel comfortable carrying out this type of meeting. But yeah, how do you have that expectations exchange? And then the other one is called a solution circle. So the expectations exchanges that I've done before, you can go in pairs, you can have maybe groups of 3 or 4, or you could do it as a big group. If you want, you can just be sitting around in a circle and just talk about, okay, so heading into this weekend, what are we expecting, right, from one another? Try to keep things, if you can, of course, you want to keep them as constructive as possible, but hopefully as honest as possible and respectful as possible, and not being afraid to talk about hard things. Because it makes sense that there's going to be a lot of different types of opinions and personalities on your team. I think volleyball is a beautiful opportunity to teach young people that, yeah, you're going to run into and have to work alongside people that aren't exactly like you. They're going to have different views, right? And it could be a really safe place to explore those skills. And make sure, coaches, that you are part of that as well. So the coaches and athletes might have expectations of one another. So make sure you include that in the conversation. The other one is kind of a spin on this. So it's not just what do you expect, but it's what are the problems for which we probably need some solutions, right? There could be some things that have been cropping up. Maybe you've gone to your coach and you've said that something's really on your mind, or something doesn't seem to be working. And the coach doesn't know that they necessarily have all the answers, and nor do they want to have them. They actually want you to help provide some solutions too. Again, this is a peer-driven, safe place that hopefully there's someone who's an adult in the group. It could be manager, it could be coach, assistant coach, whoever that is, senior athlete, who's running it. And again, just setting aside 30 to 45 minutes. Don't know that I do this one in pairs, because you're trying to find a solution. More brains can create more solutions. So I'd say 3 little groups of 3. Then you don't end up having this kind of group thing where the 2 people think they've solved everything. Have that third person in there to be that poke the holes in the ideas and create more diversity. But that's another thing. You can do it at practices or games or on road trips. Safe places where you can do that. So I don't know, Kyla, if you've had times where you think about those times different, because you've played in a bunch of different contexts, where you had challenges, and it wasn't always, we've got this webinar is geared towards the athletes and their families, where it was really put on you as the athletes to maybe solve some of the challenges, or maybe teach each other how to treat each other through having an expectations exchange. Can you think back to some exercises like that, or maybe they just happened organically? I'm sorry, I didn't give you a heads up on this one, but
That's
maybe you
okay.
just boom, it's your turn.
I know, right? Have the answers. Got them.
Got 'em.
I think one of them, again, it happened at UBC. I think we've talked about this before on another webinar. Kind of similar is the ideal performance state. So IPS, of when you're at rocketing at a 10, you're feeling your most confident, your best. What do you need from your teammates and your coaches to get there, basically? Or like, what does that look like when you're a 10 out of 10? What are your teammates doing to you? What are they saying? How does it feel on the court? How does it feel when you're in a timeout? What is the bench doing? What are the assistant coaches doing? I think that, and going around in a circle to share how you can get there is so important, because again, as you were saying, Shaunna, it's amazing the variety of humans that you will play volleyball with over your life. It's like amazingly interesting and unique humans that you just maybe you don't get along with very much off of the court, and that's fine. If there's, like, again, a mutual level of respect, doesn't matter. Like, we're here to play volleyball, have fun, and get the job done. But I think me to Emma to Shaunna, we're gonna want different things from the people around us. So whether that's immediate feedback after you make a mistake, let's say, do you want it, just kind of light, like, okay, you got the next one, like, I have your back, go for it, and like you kind of want that, positive reinforcement. Do you want your coach to say something to you? Do you want more of like a strategic comment coming at you, like, okay, the block's more cross, try hitting it down line next time? I think that's so important to know how your teammates operate. That's just going to help so much. So again, that doesn't have to be from the coach. That can be just the next practice. You guys can, when you're just taking off shoes, knee pads, stretching, like that could just be, get into a circle, let's talk about this. It's really so important to have. And whether that's not even talked about, it should be, and it could be. And if it's not, you as a player can also approach that as trying to figure out what each player needs. Like, I can go up to this person who's just, maybe they've had a tough practice or a tough game. You can say, okay, what do you need from me next time? Like, I do want to support you. It looked like, you were struggling and like we, didn't rally around you enough. Like, is there something that I can do? It it really it really helps. Another thing, um, hmm, I I don't know. It's hard to go back into so long ago into my volleyball years, but I don't think I was a born leader or captain, let's say, but I was pretty empathetic as a player. So I really felt and knew what it was like to, arrive to a practice or a tryout or a volleyball clinic or a camp and not know anyone, and how like scary that is. I grew up on the Sunshine Coast, and there was only, one volleyball team, one club team. My mom coached it, and my best friends were playing. So it was a very, very small club. So, but I had aspirations to play on the national team and, play professionally, but before that, just in university. So I was going into lots of clinics, lots of camps, and knew absolutely zero people for years, like it was super scary. It sucks when everyone's paired up, everyone, is seeing all of their friends, everyone's having a great time, and you're peeing your pants, you're so scared. So I felt that immediately. And once I started, being that person that had those connections moving forward, I really tried to go out of my way to find the people that didn't have them, because I knew what it was like when it wasn't so fun. And so I think through that, you just kind of naturally develop those leadership skills. And because coaches see you doing that and see you trying to include everybody, that is what people want in a leader. And they want to, as that leader, they want to uncover what the teammates need, how you play your best. Okay, I'm supporting you. How can I help you? So I think, and again, if you go backwards, if you're wanting to have a team, that's inclusive, that has a lot of leaders that are leading by example. Um, it's just those small moments and those small things that you can do. You can check up with players um, after a practice, after a game. It's just those touch points that are so important and so key. And that's something that I did personally for a very long time early on, that I think really helped me develop into a leader, but also try to help cultivate like a safe team environment.
You would have been my rock star that I would have wanted doing the, solution circle, and you would have been running I would have been, excuse me, Kyle, can you please get over here and do the exchange, do the expectations exchange for, because that's what you need though. You need the really empathetic, and the
Yeah, and
self-aware.
I wasn't like I'm very shy by nature, and I was a very shy kid, but I just
Mhm.
had that like drive of like knowing what it feels like when you're not included, or when
Yeah.
things are scary, or when you're not supported if you make mistakes or whatever it is. So I just really wanted to make sure that other people didn't feel that. So you don't have to be this exuberant,
No.
bubbly personality. I think it can morph into that again, like mine kind of did, as like you get more confident in like a role that you can play on your team, but it certainly didn't start that way.
Right. It kind of grows from it. I think that you start to build your confidence, right? Because you realize, okay, this is actually kind of a superpower that I have here that I can feel. I can feel for myself and I can feel for other people. And plus, every team doesn't want all leaders. We have to
Yeah.
have really good followers too. We have to have or just really good kind of go with the flowers too. You want diversity. So thank you so much. I love both of those really great, tangible examples. Um, and then so sort of leading into focusing a lot on the positive side. I try to, whenever I'm working with groups, I don't label them sort of a bullying session, because people talk about bullying. It's one form of maltreatment that can occur in sport. And it's actually something we're really taking seriously across all sports in Canada. I think we're trying to finally do right by the youth and all the way through to adult and pro sport. But four of the top ways that you can work to prevent some of that antisocial behavior, some of which can lead to forms of bullying. These four, just again, trust building. So trust building types of environments where you're paying attention to players' feelings, whether they're positive or negative, right? Feelings speak loudly because they usually speak in behaviors, right? But we need to provide athletes the forum to get aware of their feelings and to actually talk about them and address them if they're leading to antisocial behaviors, right? So you've got to create a space where that can be talked about. Exactly what you just spoke about, Kyla. The second one is you have to find ways to become a cohesive team, definitely on the court. It's helpful off the court. Not everybody has to be best friends. But for me, to be a cohesive team, again, the trust has to be there, respect has to be there. You don't have to be best friends with everybody. There are going to be teams where there are just some really different personality types, but you can all still have fun, respect one another, understand how you can all find a way to mesh on court if these types of expectation exchanges and solution building and values are adhered to. It becomes less important that everybody's exactly the same, right? The third one,
Shaunna,
if you
can I interject?
yeah, go for it, please.
The thought about the cohesion. I do think it's so important, especially in the younger years, like pre-university, to have that cohesion even off the court. I think it's a very challenging skill, and it's a skill to not have cohesion off the court.
Off the court, yeah, when you're
Right.
like
and
15.
and be able to still mesh and work well together as a team. It's a very hard skill, and again, even through university, it's still really challenging because you're still kind of trying to figure out, you know what makes everybody tick, how you play your best. And I would say, like, for me personally, you have to learn quickly playing professionally, especially because half the people don't speak the same language. They're from different countries. So like the values are completely different. So it's challenging, but you don't, see each other at all out of practice, outside of practice. But for these younger years, again, pre-university, I think building the cohesion off the court as much as you can will really translate onto the court. Um, yeah,
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, like, nail that home because, and again, you don't have to be best friends, but you do have to be friendly and nice to everyone. And
Yeah.
you can try to be best friends with everyone. Like my high school, again, my high school team, school team and club team, um, we had players on the team from different cliques, I guess. And so, but we were all friends and we were all friends playing volleyball. But then at school, like, we would divide and conquer to our different friends or
Yeah.
different groups of friends. And like, that was great. And that was no problem. And it actually kind of helps, like, I know not everyone's at the same small school, but that also helped, like blend our grade, and the grades, like, because this person and this person are friends. And so then these people kind of come together. So I think there's just like all good things that can come from, trying to become a closer unit off the court as well.
I love
Sorry
that.
to
Oh,
interject.
no, I'm so glad that you like drew attention to that. It's hard enough when you're, a 29-year-old professional trying to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
it's
it's
really
hard.
hard. It's so hard. Like how on earth can we expect, a 14 or a 16-year-old to do it if we haven't put effort into building that team cohesion, you know? So I love that you just like, let's shine a light on that one because it's so key. And that's behind a lot of that antisocial behavior, right? When we haven't built that cohesion, that's when it crops up.
Yeah, exactly.
And it also crops up too. So if things like some of the really problematic human emotions and experiences like envy, like jealousy, right? Which are huge and they really show up in the teen years. Envy and jealousy, and they're not the same thing. One is not wanting to give up something that you have, you feel threatened, and the other one, envy, is wanting something that you don't have. Either way, they're both really painful and challenging parts of the human existence. But if we can't figure out how to name some of those things, or anger, frustration, jealousy, sadness, disappointment, all those things, we've got to learn how to self-regulate some of those, sometimes on our own, sometimes co-regulating with the help of our teammates or the guidance of our coaches. But you'll note that I put here by a coach who also knows how to self-regulate, right? No offense, you kind of do, and we all know that there are coaches that struggle with that. So in the next hour, we'll be talking to the coaches, right? And just, shout out to them that we know how hard the job is. It can be a very triggering experience working with young people that are filled with passion and all kinds of personality types. But learning self-regulation skills, I think, is a really important piece. And it all kind of fits into this big puzzle that we're building. Because then, when it comes down to making good decisions, right, that are tied into the values, you can kind of keep that level head, or hopefully come to a place where you are a little more, be able to create a bit of space from that triggered reaction and making the smart decision, right? The deliberate, thought through decision versus just being incredibly reactive. These are things that sport can teach us, even though it's super tough and there's a ton of all kinds of stress hormones and challenges that get thrown at us in sport. These are the kinds of skills that Kyla was talking about, coming up through her own development, like empathy right here. It's one of the biggest cogs that we have to build. Understanding how much we can influence one another positively and negatively, right? How we can manage our emotions, how we can have an accurate self-assessment, like really take in other people's feedback and truly learn to grow from other people's assessments, how we can build our own confidence, and then also how we can be aware of how we're wired emotionally, right? We don't all have to look the same, but we have to learn awareness skills, right? So these are some of the skills when we look at, for example, anti-bullying literature. It's interesting. It's not just volleyball skills that are going to help with that piece. It's some of those like emotional intelligence skills. So we already have, for those of you that might be new to Volleyball BC programming or this line of webinars that we actually have a mental health strategy toolkit that has a ton of tools that can help athletes manage challenging thoughts and emotions. We launched a lot of those last year. In fact, we have some targeted webinars, the performance anxiety webinar, the setting up for success webinar that Kyla was also participated in, ways you can take care of yourself and manage your stress. We called it a self-care. So I would really recommend, if you haven't gone and watched those, go back and watch. I mean, I'm assuming they can watch them. Can they, Emma? Can they still?
They absolutely can. Yeah, they're all on the Volleyball BC YouTube channel.
Okay,
But if
good.
you go, actually, all of these resources, we have a safety hub, a new safety hub that we launched, and there's a section on the safety hub on our website that's called Mental Health and Wellbeing, and it links to the toolkit, it links to the resources, and then there are links there to the videos as well. Or you can just go onto YouTube and type Volleyball BC, and it's going to come up there.
Awesome. So that's where you'll find all of this material. And this last one you'll see listed in the middle paragraph there. So reading the tools on listening to your teammates with empathy, right? How you can actually engage in like a conversation with someone that you may not totally agree at the outset, how she's behaving or how he's behaving or how they're behaving, but you want to know what's going on with them, right? What's going on that made them act that way? Listen to understand. And the tools on empathetic listening, they're great for coaches. They're great for parents for really understanding their kids and vice versa. And for players to really get a better idea how it is to actively listen to someone instead of preparing your response, right? So how can I really listen and be present and better understand? I include this statement down on the bottom: hurt people, right? So if someone's hurting in some way, or there's something going on with them emotionally, or one of those challenging situations we were alluding to earlier, like jealousy or envy or disappointment, they're struggling with their own self-worth on the team, where they fit in, they're more shy, they're having trouble making connections, they're feeling excluded. Sometimes we can misinterpret how someone is acting because we tend to mind read, or we think we know. We don't know unless we ask and we have an empathetic conversation, right? So we need to grow these skills. And I think there's so many amazing, smart, talented, phenomenal athletes that play volleyball. It is the ultimate team sport and the ultimate place to build these awesome skills in young people. It's the perfect environment to do it in. I love this video, and I sure hope you're going to be able to watch it. I'm going to play it in a second. I'll turn up the sound. It's not a volleyball video, but it's a great video of a male coach so this young athlete has just had a really emotional moment. He has just lost. He is, in the bigger clip, he is very, very upset. And this is right in a public space. Of course, they obtained permission from his family to share this, but his coach does such a great job of teaching emotional regulation to this young athlete. I'll let the video speak for itself.
Your emotions. Your day as a competitor is over, right? Now, what is your job? Be a teammate. So you're going to stand right here, collect your emotions. We're going to transition from being a competitor to now cheering for our teammates and supporting the team. So collect your thoughts, collect your emotions right now. We can't fix what just happened until Monday, right? So we're going to let it go. We're going to transition into being a teammate now. And we're going to have fun, and we're going to get ready for the next tournament together, okay? You did great today. You had some tough matches. That's all it really came down to. It's not like you got blown out of the water. You had some tough matches, okay? We'll get that stuff fixed up.
And a coach delivered that message, but you know what? A teammate could deliver that message to another teammate. A parent can deliver that message at home. You know, an athlete from one squad can deliver that to a friend that they're seeing in the spirit of sportspersonship. Go up to them and say, hey, wow, like, hold your head up. hold your head up. That was a tough one. You know, I watched and be proud, right? Regardless of what the score was. So he's helping him reframe those thoughts, right? And just take a deep breath. And it's okay. He's not shaming him, right? So we can do this.
Your
We
emotions.
can do this for our colleagues. We can do this for other athletes. We can have kind of a routine, just like he kind of described there. And if you go back on some of those webinars, we talk about a ton of tools. I've just created like I've clustered a bunch of them together here on this particular slide. I call it like a grounding routine. If you're starting to feel yourself getting a little bit too high with the emotions, or maybe you're feeling flat, you're feeling low and you need to get energized. Lots of different things you can do. Could be an individual or the group comes together as a team. A deep breath, right? Or heart breathing, where you put your hand over your heart and just feel your heart rate and bring it down. This is a great one whenever there's technical timeout or any kind of stop and play. A team cheer is a great one for coming together. You all probably know all this stuff, but just remember and remind yourselves, you don't have to feel powerless when you get overwhelmed. There are lots of ways. Clapping your hands, say a phrase that energizes you, or the bottom one is co-regulation, which means you're regulating yourself, but so is your teammate, like a low five. That's a co-regulation technique because you're touching hands, you're sharing in the feeling, you're transferring, and you're supporting each other. And your nervous system will respond, right? And I'm sure Kyla has a ton of great examples of different types of behaviors that are very contagious. If you start to do them systematically as a team, that everybody does, that people can start to come together and support each other. And maybe, I don't know if there's some off the top of your head, Kyla, things that you used either to co-regulate with your teammates to bring each other up or down, or things you did yourself when you really need to reframe things or reset. What worked for you?
I am very much co-regulator.
Yeah, I love it.
I have chatted about that on previous webinars, but if I've made a mistake, or I'm just like not feeling good, it's usually after a mistake. I'm high-fiving 25 times before like the ball is served. I just like I need that teammate interaction. It also just like, I'm doing something with my hands instead of just like, waiting for the ball to be served. Like think about, for the athletes on the call, think about if you've just done a hitting mistake and now you go back to, your spot to get, for them to serve. Like it feels so much better to like turn to your teammate to be like, okay, I've got the next one, or like grab their hand or get a high five, instead of just like going back to your spot and staring at the ball. Like it's just, for me, and if I wasn't getting that from my teammates, I was going up to them, like, getting a high five. Okay, I've got the next one. Telling the setter, okay, set me again, or whatever it is. That also just like helps me, even that like physical touch of like, okay, now that's in the past, now we can move forward. And again, like telling the setter, set me again, or talking, to someone that's beside you in the rotation, I'm going to do this. I've got the next one, whatever that is. So it also builds confidence for the next play. Lots of times two things, if the team is making a mistake, like there's lots of like frantic plays going on, I would often like hold the huddle and we would do a collective breath. Often I'm needing it, so I'm assuming that someone else is needing that as well. But the collective breath is good because everyone, is just like, like you can just feel everyone like, okay, good. I also needed to breathe. I've been forgetting to breathe for the last 2 minutes, so it's it's good. And I think also I've also pulled the team, whether that's in a game or in a practice, if things aren't like, we're not holding each other to values of like, high competition and accountability and whatever it is, and like practices, you know, wheels are kind of falling off, you know, I've also grabbed and like held people in the huddle to say like, okay, we need to refocus right now. Like, let's do this. Like if a coach sees you doing that, talking to your team, they're not going to, you know, input the ball right away, or, you know, like they're going to let you take control of that situation. So I think just any kind of moment that you can take to either, yeah, regulate any kind of emotions is positive. Um, Coaches often do that as a timeout, of course, but if they're not doing that, yeah, you can do breaths, you can grab a teammate, just to like get out that feeling in order to move on.
Exactly. Awesome. Yay. I'm glad you really drew attention to the co-regulation. It's been my experience that volleyball are probably some of the highest co-regulators of all the team sports. I love it. That's why I call it the ultimate team sport, because so many.
Well, yeah, if I didn't want to co-regulate, I would maybe be playing an individual sport.
Yeah, exactly. You know, now, and having said that, you get the odd one, right? That's a little more,
Yeah, I've played with some.
yeah,
You don't like, they don't want you to talk to them after they've made a mistake. Like they just need to, you know,
just gonna
do
do
their own
a
thing.
Zen thing. Yeah, like they'll just kind of have their own routine. But I would say, as a general rule, it tends to be they're more of the outlier. I think it's
Yeah.
way more common to have the culture of co-regulation is really key. And I would recommend, I mean, I'll be talking to the coaches in 30 minutes, but the coaches do the same thing, that they find a way to co-regulate, like just make a small comment to, if they're lucky enough to have an assistant coach or a manager, someone else, you know, use that power versus something else, you know, because there's lots of challenges with being overwhelmed as a coach as well. Already kind of spoke about this idea of heart breathing, but I just thought it would be a good piece to end on as we sort of finish the official delivery for tonight. And also having athletes connect with what those values were, or their credo, I call it, sort of what do they stand for? And am I going to be gentle with myself that it was, you know, today might have been a tough practice, or maybe it was all amazing, who knows? But either way, I'm going to be kind to myself. I'm going to be kind to my teammates. And I'm going to remind myself of this when I go home. I'll have a reminder in my bedroom somewhere. Maybe I've got a training log that I keep track of. Maybe I've even got some kind of token thing or pictures on my phone, an album that I dedicate to volleyball. And I look at that and I think, yeah, that's me living by the things that I stand for, and reminding yourself that you're a whole bunch of things. You're not just you're not only a volleyball player. You're all kinds of things, amazing things. So yeah, thinking about what your credo is, just your values. Ultimately, this is what we want to see, right? So Kyla said it, that sense of selflessness. Individual peak performances happen when the whole team, like you can't just have individual, independent, selfish players, right? You're fostering the individual improvement, right? That will lead to team performance. High morale, which is just another way of saying cohesion. People feel great and they like each other and they treat each other with respect. They aren't terrified of failing and they care about and support each other. Now, it sounds like great, easy on the list, but hopefully you've got a few ideas from tonight as athletes and families that you can start taking these ideas home and bringing this forward in your own life and in your own teams. And I don't know if there's any questions, but we've got a little.
Well, you've only got a few minutes left, but I do have a couple of questions that have come up. One of them is I have quite a lot of questions here about how to deal with issues when they do arise. Like either a dynamic that's happening between two people, an emotion, like if someone's jealous or envious about playing time, or like, you know, there's somebody who is being disruptive or disagreements on the team, like tips for how to address or resolve those. And I think you've talked a little bit about the solution circle and some of those, but I guess as an athlete, what would be some of the suggestions from either of you, I guess, on like how do you address those and resolve those?
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Kyla?
Sure. So if it MO would be like bullying or just tension, yes,
I
tension.
guess, yes. I think I have a lot that says about tensions, about some jealousy, or people feeling like maybe there's people getting playing time over others that's causing rifts in the team, or any kind of dynamic like that. If it actually comes up, because I think we've heard a lot here about how we're trying to prevent it from coming up. But when
But
it does come up, because I think it will come up, I'm sure in most teams,
Yeah.
it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Like, are there like some practical things that you've experienced or ways to address that? Is it going to talk to your coach? Is it like, what's the...
yeah, I think and whether coaches are on now or later, having the conversations with your players on what their role is, I think can be helpful. You just need to make sure that, okay, if they're not in a starting role, there's still the ability to become that, with tweaks that they need to do in their game. But I think the biggest thing is that communication piece. Like, I think, I don't know, there's some kind of quote, something about silence breeds something. But if you're not talking about it, it's just going to fester and it gets worse. And then you start thinking about things in your brain, and you make up stories in your brain, they make up stories in their brain, and then you talk to someone else about it, and then you're gossiping, and then they talk about, and like, it's just gets so much bigger than it often needs to be. I hope that, again, part of, if you're doing any kind of value system that we had discussed before, that like honesty and open communication is part of that, or the psychological safety, or whatever the key piece is, that this comes under it. Again, it's a skill, and it's hard, especially if you're, like a softer personality, of, like going to someone to say like, this made me uncomfortable, or like, it really doesn't make me feel good when you say these things or do these things. Like, if you can do that, I promise you it will get better than if you just try to deal with it on your own, even take it home to talk to your parents. Like, I think having that face-to-face communication with someone, if there's tension, or just, and yeah, if there's tension with you and another player, like be the player that kind of takes that hard first step of taking that person after practice to, like, hey, I feel that there's tension between us. Like, can we, talk about this? Can we figure it out? Or like, go for coffee or go for a walk. It's often again, the lack of communication, that it gets built up in everybody's mind. And then when you actually have that conversation, it's like, oh, well, I thought you meant this when you said this, or I felt you did this. And the other person's like, no, I promise, like, it wasn't like that. And it's like usually a misunderstanding. So I think that is really key to the tension piece. And the bullying piece, if you can go to that person, if you feel comfortable. If you don't, you can maybe take a friend. If it doesn't get better, I think then for sure you can involve the coach in that, but just making sure that you're speaking to those things across the board, I think really, really helps. And again, if you're not comfortable doing it, there's definite ways to still make sure that it happens.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that I have too many things to add, other than I like using one when I'm trying to encourage athletes to express themselves the way that, like, self-advocate, right? And go and investigate and speak about the thing that upset them, whatever the topic is. There's one framework, it's called the WIN framework, WIN. And the W stands for, if somebody's saying something over and over again, it's really hurting your feelings. For example, like, we're in kind of in that bullying territory, right? Where someone is doing something, or they are, it's really hurting, and no one's no one's willing to step in with you or to help you get through it. Addressing that in a conversation, if you feel like you've got enough safety to do so, saying when you, and then name whatever the behavior is, I feel, and let them know, you know, how this feels, right? And I need, that's the N is for need. I need, you know, us to talk about this, or I need you to not use that body language or use that word, right? So if there's these antisocial kind of interactions in a hardcore bullying where there's actual abusive behavior going on, that you really need to, I think it's best to bring an adult in and use rule of two, because we want to really address that as a team. But like Kyla was explaining, when it's just something interpersonal that could fester and might be a misunderstanding, let them know how that thing that they said or did made you feel, right? And then let them know, I'm just wondering why you did that, you know, or did I misinterpret it? Because when you did that, like, it made me feel this way. They might be like, what? Oh my gosh, I had no idea, right? Or maybe they knew darn well what it was going to do. And now you speaking up about it, that might start to make them think twice and realize, wow, this is having a big effect on our relationship and our, you know, my reputation as a on this team.
Often, again, what it was on the webinar earlier is that hurt people hurt people hurt. Is that what it was?
Yeah, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like not, and even coming to a place of like not necessarily being um like coming in super hot.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like
Accusing, you know?
yeah, exactly. Like shaming the aggressor or whatever it is. I think they are hurting for whatever reason. You know, and like if you can come to a place, you know, of just trying to figure it out. But also, as you were saying, Shaunna, like if it is actual bullying, that like that's going nowhere. There's absolutely zero place for that. Like there's no point. There needs to be consequences in some kind of capacity, especially if it continues. Like after a conversation has happened, if you know, for sure, coach, parents, administrator, whatever it is, because
yeah, there's
you know,
processes in place for that, for sure. We are literally 2 minutes away from time, but one very last question, which is come in anonymously, is like, what do you do when this conflict is with a coach? So it's a bit of a different twist on the team dynamics. But any suggestions in those scenarios?
Well, I
okay.
guess, Kyla, go ahead. You can go first if you like.
You
The
can.
1 minute version of the complex question. Maybe we can send out materials too, but go ahead.
Yes.
It's similar, like if it's again bullying, abusive behavior, it's just a straight up no, 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 no. That can, you know, you can talk to a parent. If there's an assistant coach or like any kind of authoritative figure that you trust, parents can send a message to a director, whatever it may be, if that is something, you know, that it's already gone too far. Hopefully it hasn't. And if it is just tensions, I've had that even on teams that I've loved or coaches that I've loved. I've had tensions with coaches before. I've usually called a meeting or asked to talk with them. And again, like we actually didn't really talk about the playing time and like the jealousy and whatnot, but that can like for sure be talked about with the coach. I think the same way that you would bring it to a teammate, like just presenting of like, this is how I feel. When you do these things, it would be more helpful if you did this. Just having those, you know, like blanket statements, same thing, like not accusatory or anything. But I think, again, there's like kind of varying degrees of if it's in this space, you can have that conversation, see how they react, see if it gets better. You, again, might need to remind them a few times. hey, remember, I would rather have positive feedback after a mistake than negative. And if it is a bigger issue, then I think that will be dealt with a little bit differently. Um, but
100%.
but bringing it to them, I think everybody has the ability or should have the opportunity to make changes, and that is coach included. So bringing it to their attention will be helpful, and hopefully they will make changes.
Yeah, that's awesome answer. The only thing I think I can even add to that is just because it's a power difference between, like, say, the athlete and the athlete are in the same tier, because it's a power imbalance, you might want to, well, you should have maybe a third party or do the rule of two. So where you have someone else, it could be, ideally it's another adult, so it could be an assistant coach or someone who's playing the role of a manager. Or it could be a coalition of athletes who go together to support one another. It's not about ganging up. It's about the fact that it's a power imbalance.
Yeah.
We've got to find a way to regulate the power a little bit, right? When you're 14 or 15 and
Yeah.
talking to a 40-year-old. So, but all of those other amazing suggestions are great. I hope that's
Write it down too. Sometimes when I go
yeah.
even positive meetings, first of all, I always cried in my,
Right.
club and university, even with, again, UBC head coach, amazing, wouldn't hurt a fly. I cried every single time just because there's emotions flying and feeling overwhelmed and whatever it is. So having it written down, like points, also can be really helpful. Because if you're like me, you go in and you forget everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I usually keep cue cards when I work with teams. I keep, those studying cue cards. I keep those before the player meetings. Here, hand them out like candy.
Let's remember what those are.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have run out of time, but thank you both of you so much. I mean, this is such a fascinating topic. We could probably do a whole like weekly retreat on team dynamics, and people have done that. But I think you've both shared so many practical ideas and tips and suggestions for people as we enter this. Like, we're now kind of, I don't know, 4 weeks into the club season. So teams have formed and they're just finding their groove. So this is perfect timing for that. So thank you both so much. And for those of you who've attended, thank you for coming. And we will be back next month, actually in a couple of weeks, I think, about dealing with mental health and injury and how you deal with that. So please sign up. It's on our website and we look forward to seeing everybody then. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.